Sometimes the strongest connections exist in silence. No messages, no calls, no clear signs of communication. Yet, the emotional presence of that person feels impossible to ignore. You think of them without trying. You feel them during important moments. And no matter how much time passes, the connection does not feel finished. Psychology explains that deep emotional bonds do not rely solely on communication. They are formed through emotional resonance, shared vulnerability, and meaningful psychological impact. Once such a bond is created, it does not disappear simply because contact stops. Instead, it moves beneath the surface, continuing to influence thoughts, emotions, and behavior in subtle but powerful ways. You may question whether the connection is real or if it only exists in your mind. But emotional bonds follow patterns that are widely recognized in psychology. When someone is deeply connected to you, even without communication, certain signs appear consistently. These signs are not dramatic gestures or obvious actions. They are quiet, internal, and often misunderstood. Silence, in these cases, is not empty. It feels heavy. It carries emotional weight. It creates a sense that something remains unresolved. This happens because emotions that are not expressed do not disappear. They stay active, waiting for understanding, clarity, or emotional readiness. People often assume that lack of communication means lack of care. Psychology shows that this is not always true. Sometimes distance exists because emotions are too strong, too confusing, or too overwhelming to confront directly. Fear of vulnerability, fear of loss, or fear of emotional exposure can cause people to withdraw while still remaining emotionally connected. Deep connections often reveal themselves through subtle signs, emotional reactions that seem disproportionate, sudden thoughts that appear without reason, or a sense of familiarity and safety that does not fade with time. These experiences are not coincidences. They are indicators of emotional attachment and unresolved emotional energy. In this video, we explore 15 psychology signs that reveal when someone is deeply connected to you, even if there is no communication. These signs are based on emotional behavior, subconscious attachment, and psychological patterns that govern human connection. They help explain why someone may watch from afar, feel triggered by your name, or remain emotionally affected by your life changes without reaching out. This is not about predicting actions or forcing outcomes. It is about understanding emotional truth. When you understand the psychology behind silence, distance, and emotional presence, confusion turns into clarity. You begin to see that not all connections are loud, and not all bonds require constant contact to exist. As you listen to these signs, notice which ones resonate with your experience. Emotional intuition often recognizes truth long before logic does. Understanding these signs may help you make sense of a connection that refuses to fade, even in silence. Number 1. You keep appearing in their thoughts without reason ****. When someone keeps appearing in another person's thoughts without any clear external trigger, psychology explains this as a sign of unresolved emotional attachment. The human mind does not repeatedly return to people who have no emotional significance. Thoughts are often guided by emotional memory, subconscious bonding, and unfinished psychological loops. Even without communication, emotional connections continue to exist in the background of the mind. This happens because the brain associates certain people with emotional safety, excitement, comfort, or emotional intensity. When that bond is not fully expressed or resolved, the mind revisits it again and again. This does not require active effort. It happens naturally, often during quiet moments, stress, or emotional reflection. The absence of contact can actually intensify these thoughts rather than weaken them. From a psychological perspective, recurring thoughts about a specific person often indicate emotional imprinting. This means that the person has left a lasting emotional mark that the brain has not released. Even if life moves forward, the emotional connection remains stored in memory networks linked to feelings rather than logic. People may try to distract themselves, focus on other responsibilities, or even convince themselves they have moved on. Yet the thoughts return unexpectedly. This is because emotional bonds are not erased by silence. They fade only when they are emotionally processed or replaced with closure. If you feel that someone keeps coming to mind without reason, it often reflects a mutual emotional resonance that still exists beneath the surface, even without communication. Number 2. There is a strong emotional pull between you ***. A strong emotional pull is one of the clearest signs of a deep connection. This pull is not based on constant interaction, physical presence, or frequent communication. Instead, it is rooted in emotional chemistry and psychological alignment. You may feel drawn to this person without understanding why, even when logic suggests you should not. Psychology explains emotional pull as a combination of emotional familiarity, shared emotional frequency, and subconscious attachment. When two people emotionally resonate, their nervous systems recognize each other as significant. This creates a sense of gravity, a pull that feels emotional rather than physical. This pull often becomes stronger during separation. Distance removes distractions and allows emotions to surface more clearly. You may feel a sudden urge to think about them, check on them, or wonder how they are doing. This is not coincidence. Emotional bonds activate the same neural pathways as physical closeness, which is why distance does not weaken the feeling. A strong emotional pull can also show up as emotional reactions that seem disproportionate. Their happiness may affect your mood. Their struggles may feel personal. Even silence may feel emotionally loud. These reactions suggest that your emotional systems are still connected. When an emotional pull exists on both sides, it often remains dormant rather than disappearing. Until the emotions are expressed, acknowledged, or resolved, the pull continues to exist quietly, influencing thoughts and feelings from a distance. Number 3. Silence feels heavy, not empty. Silence only feels empty when there is no emotional connection. When silence feels heavy, it is because something meaningful exists beneath it. Psychology explains this as emotional presence without communication. Even without words, emotions continue to occupy space in the mind and heart. A heavy silence suggests unresolved feelings, unspoken thoughts, or emotional tension that has not been released. Instead of feeling peaceful, the absence of communication feels charged. You may feel emotionally aware of the person even when nothing is happening externally. This happens because emotional bonds do not require conversation to stay alive. When two people are deeply connected, silence becomes a container for emotion rather than an absence of it. The mind fills the silence with memories, imagined conversations, and emotional reflections. From a psychological point of view, heavy silence indicates emotional significance. The brain keeps the person active in emotional memory, even without new input. This is why silence can feel uncomfortable, confusing, or emotionally intense rather than calming. Heavy silence can also indicate mutual awareness. Even without proof, you may sense that the other person feels the same weight. This shared emotional tension often exists when both people are processing emotions privately. Silence that feels heavy is not a sign of disconnection. It is often a sign that something meaningful remains unresolved, waiting for emotional clarity, expression, or closure. Number 4. You sense their energy even from a distance. Sensing someone's energy from a distance is often described emotionally rather than logically, but psychology offers an explanation. Humans are highly sensitive to emotional memory and emotional association. When someone is emotionally significant, their presence is stored internally, not externally. You may feel sudden emotional shifts, think of them randomly, or feel comforted or unsettled without knowing why. These sensations are not mystical. They are psychological responses to emotional bonding. The brain associates certain emotional states with specific people. This is why certain moments, songs, places, or moods bring a strong sense of them into awareness. Even without communication, the emotional imprint remains active. Emotional energy is essentially emotional memory combined with emotional attachment. Psychologically, this is linked to mirror neurons and emotional resonance. When two people have shared emotional experiences, their emotional patterns become familiar to each other. Distance does not erase that familiarity. You may feel calm when thinking of them, or restless when something feels unresolved. These emotional sensations are signals from your emotional system reminding you of an existing bond. Sensing someone's energy does not mean constant awareness. It often appears unexpectedly, especially during emotionally vulnerable moments. This indicates that the connection still holds emotional relevance, even in silence. Number 5. They react emotionally to your life changes. When someone reacts emotionally to your life changes despite no communication, it reveals a deep emotional connection. Psychology explains this as emotional monitoring. Even without direct contact, emotionally connected people remain emotionally aware of each other. They may feel affected by your success, your struggles, or major changes in your life. Even if they do not express it openly, their emotional response shows that you still matter to them on a deeper level. This often shows up indirectly. They may become distant, moody, nostalgic, or suddenly curious when something changes for you. These reactions occur because emotional attachment keeps the emotional bond active, regardless of physical separation. From a psychological standpoint, emotionally connected individuals experience emotional echoes. One person's emotional shift triggers a response in the other, even without conscious awareness. This is why your life changes can emotionally impact someone who is no longer present. Such reactions indicate that emotional detachment has not fully occurred. True emotional detachment leads to emotional neutrality. Emotional reactions, especially strong ones, indicate continued emotional involvement. If someone reacts emotionally to your life changes, it suggests that the connection still exists beneath the silence, quietly influencing their emotional world. Number 6. You feel an unspoken emotional bond ***. An unspoken emotional bond is one of the strongest indicators of a deep connection. Psychology explains that not all bonds rely on communication or physical presence. Some connections are formed at an emotional and subconscious level, where understanding exists without words. You may feel emotionally tied to this person even when there is no interaction, no messages, and no visible effort from either side. This bond often shows itself as emotional awareness. You may sense when something is wrong with them or feel emotionally affected by their absence. There is a quiet understanding that does not need explanation. Even without clarity, the connection feels real and persistent. From a psychological perspective, this happens when two people have shared emotional vulnerability or meaningful emotional experiences. The brain associates safety, recognition, and emotional resonance with that person. Once formed, this bond does not dissolve easily. An unspoken bond also creates emotional continuity. Even when time passes, the emotional connection resonates effortlessly in your mind, as if nothing truly ended. This is because emotional bonds exist beyond surface interaction. Such bonds often feel unfinished. There is a sense that something remains unexpressed or unresolved. Psychology shows that unexpressed emotions tend to remain active until they are acknowledged or released. If you feel emotionally connected to someone without needing communication, it often means the bond exists at a deeper level than words can reach. Number 7. They remember you without being reminded ***. When someone remembers you without external reminders, it indicates emotional significance. Psychology shows that the brain prioritizes emotionally meaningful memories. People do not remember those who had little emotional impact on them. This remembering happens spontaneously. Your name, face, or shared moments come to their mind without effort. Certain situations, emotions, or even silence can trigger memories of you. This is because emotional memory is stored differently from logical memory. Emotional memory is deeply tied to feelings. When someone remembers you naturally, it means you are associated with emotional experiences that mattered to them. These memories resurface because the emotional connection remains active. Even without communication, emotional memory keeps people psychologically present in each other's lives. They may recall how you made them feel rather than specific events. This emotional recall is powerful and persistent. Psychology explains that people may try to suppress these memories, especially if the connection feels complicated or unresolved. However, suppression often strengthens emotional recall rather than weakening it. Remembering without reminders suggests that emotional detachment has not occurred. True emotional closure leads to emotional neutrality, not spontaneous remembrance. If someone remembers you without being reminded, it is a sign that your emotional presence still exists in their inner world. Number 8. You appear in each other's dreams ***. Dreams are a reflection of subconscious processing. Psychology explains that dreams often surface unresolved emotions, suppressed thoughts, and emotionally significant connections. When two people appear in each other's dreams, it indicates ongoing emotional processing. Dreams are not random. The subconscious mind selects emotionally relevant material to work through during sleep. If someone appears in dreams repeatedly, it means the emotional bond has not been resolved consciously. Appearing in each other's dreams suggests mutual emotional relevance. Even without communication, both minds continue to process the connection internally. This often happens when emotions were not fully expressed or understood. Dreams can carry emotional intensity, comfort, longing, or confusion. These emotions reveal what the conscious mind avoids or ignores during waking life. The dream state allows emotional truth to surface without filters. Psychologically, dreaming about someone can indicate emotional attachment, emotional curiosity, or unfinished emotional business. The brain revisits emotional connections to seek resolution or understanding. When dreams involve the same person on both sides, it strengthens the indication of a shared emotional bond. The connection remains active at a subconscious level. Dreams do not create emotional connections, they reveal the ones that already exist beneath awareness. Number 9. Time and distance do not weaken the connection ***. Time and distance weaken superficial connections but often strengthen deep emotional ones. Psychology explains that emotional bonds rooted in meaning are not dependent on proximity or frequency of contact. When a connection remains emotionally strong despite time and distance, it indicates emotional anchoring. The bond is stored internally rather than maintained externally. Even long periods of silence do not erase the emotional relevance. You may notice that the feelings resurface instantly, as if no time has passed. This happens because emotional memory does not decay like ordinary memory. The emotional system recognizes familiarity immediately. Distance can sometimes intensify awareness of the bond. Without distractions, emotions become clearer. This is why distance does not always lead to emotional detachment. Psychology also shows that unresolved emotional connections remain active until they are consciously processed. Time alone does not resolve emotional bonds, understanding does. If time and distance fail to weaken the connection, it means the bond exists at a deeper psychological level. It is sustained by emotional significance, not physical closeness. Such connections often feel timeless because they are not tied to circumstance but to emotional resonance. Number 10. They watch you from afar without reaching out ***. Watching from afar without reaching out is a common sign of emotional attachment mixed with hesitation. Psychology explains this behavior as emotional monitoring combined with emotional avoidance. They may follow your life silently, stay aware of your changes, or feel emotionally invested without initiating contact. This happens when someone feels connected but is unsure, afraid, or emotionally conflicted. Watching from a distance allows emotional closeness without vulnerability. It feels safer to observe than to engage. This behavior often appears when emotions are strong but unresolved. Psychologically, this indicates that emotional detachment has not occurred. People do not monitor those they no longer care about. Attention is a form of emotional investment. They may avoid reaching out due to fear of rejection, fear of reopening emotions, or fear of losing control. Yet the emotional bond keeps pulling their attention back to you. This behavior reflects internal conflict, the desire to stay connected versus the need to protect themselves emotionally. Watching from afar suggests that the connection still holds emotional weight, even if action is delayed. It is often a sign of emotional presence without emotional courage. Number 11. You feel their presence during important moments ***. Feeling someone's presence during important moments is a strong psychological indicator of emotional significance. Psychology explains that during emotionally intense situations, such as success, stress, loss, or major decisions, the mind naturally turns toward emotionally meaningful connections. If someone consistently comes to mind during these moments, it means they occupy a core emotional position in your inner world. This does not require active communication. Emotional bonds create internal representations of people. These representations become emotionally activated during moments when support, validation, or understanding is subconsciously desired. Even in silence, their emotional presence feels real. You may feel comforted, guided, or emotionally aware of them during milestones. This happens because the brain associates that person with emotional safety or emotional depth. The mind recalls them not out of habit, but out of emotional relevance. Psychologically, this reflects attachment-based memory. Important moments heighten emotional awareness, and the mind instinctively reaches for meaningful emotional anchors. The absence of communication does not weaken this effect, sometimes it strengthens it. If you feel their presence during key moments, it suggests the connection has become part of your emotional framework. Such presence is not accidental. It reflects a bond that has integrated into your emotional processing system. Number 12. There is unfinished emotional energy between you. Unfinished emotional energy is often felt as emotional tension, curiosity, or lingering awareness. Psychology explains that emotions that are not expressed, understood, or resolved remain psychologically active. They do not disappear simply because communication stops. This unfinished energy may feel like unanswered questions, unspoken feelings, or a sense that something was left incomplete. You may feel emotionally drawn back to the connection without knowing why. This is because the emotional system seeks resolution. Psychologically, unfinished emotional energy creates open emotional loops. The brain continues to revisit the connection in an attempt to process what was left unresolved. Silence does not close these loops. Understanding does. This energy often manifests as sudden thoughts, emotional reactions, or a sense of emotional familiarity that refuses to fade. It may feel like something is still pending between you. Unfinished emotional energy can exist on both sides. Even without proof, you may sense that the other person feels it too. This mutual emotional tension is often subtle but persistent. When emotional energy remains unfinished, it indicates that the connection still holds psychological importance. Closure has not yet occurred, which means the bond is still active beneath the surface. Number 13. They get triggered when your name is mentioned. Emotional triggers reveal emotional attachment. Psychology explains that when someone reacts emotionally to hearing your name, it means the emotional connection is still alive. Neutral connections do not produce emotional reactions. Being triggered does not always look obvious. It can appear as sudden silence, defensiveness, mood changes, or exaggerated reactions. These responses occur because your name activates emotional memory. Psychologically, emotional triggers are tied to unresolved feelings. Your name becomes a stimulus linked to emotional experiences, not just a label. This is why hearing it can cause an immediate emotional response. Triggers often emerge when emotions are suppressed. If someone has not processed their feelings, the emotional reaction bypasses logic and surfaces instinctively. Getting triggered suggests that emotional detachment has not happened. True detachment leads to emotional neutrality, not emotional response. Even negative reactions still indicate emotional investment. If your name still affects them emotionally, it means you remain psychologically significant. The emotional system has not let go, even if behavior suggests distance. Number 14. The connection feels familiar and safe. A connection that feels familiar and safe often reflects emotional recognition rather than novelty. Psychology explains that emotional safety comes from feeling understood, accepted, and emotionally aligned. This familiarity does not depend on time spent together. You may feel at ease with this person, even without frequent interaction. The connection feels natural rather than forced. This sense of safety indicates emotional compatibility and psychological comfort. Familiarity can also feel timeless. Even after long periods of silence, the emotional comfort resumes instantly in your mind. This happens because emotional familiarity is stored deeply in memory. Psychologically, this is linked to secure emotional resonance. The nervous system recognizes the person as emotionally safe, which reduces emotional defenses. This does not mean the relationship is perfect or without conflict. It means the emotional bond feels grounding rather than stressful. When a connection feels both familiar and safe, it suggests emotional alignment that goes beyond surface interaction. Such connections are rare and often deeply impactful. Number 15. Communication will happen when the timing aligns. Psychology shows that communication is influenced not only by desire but by emotional readiness. When a deep connection exists, communication often pauses not because of lack of feeling, but because one or both people are not emotionally prepared. Timing alignment occurs when emotional fear, confusion, or external pressures settle enough for honesty to emerge. Until then, silence may persist even though the emotional bond remains intact. Psychologically, people avoid communication when they fear emotional consequences. Once emotional clarity increases, communication becomes possible again. This does not guarantee immediate contact, but it suggests that emotional processing is still ongoing. The connection remains active, waiting for emotional alignment. When timing aligns, communication often feels natural rather than forced. It happens when emotional readiness replaces emotional resistance. This sign reflects patience within emotional bonds. Deep connections often unfold slowly, guided by emotional readiness rather than urgency.